All right, I'm going to summarize, or I'm going to go over the class work that we did in class on Friday. And what you should do is write down what you need into your notebook to help summarize what we did. And remember that the test is open notes, and so you should write down as much as you can that you think is going to help you prepare for the test. So here we have step 1, step 2, step 3. And what you should notice is the difference between here and here is we added 3 squares. And when you look at this one, we've added 3 more squares. And when we look, if we're trying to figure out what step 4 is going to be, we're adding even 3 more squares. So if we want to write down the function rule, so before we can write down the function rule, we need to figure out, okay, so here we added 3. Here we added 3. Here we added 3. So to go from here, so instead of adding 3, we need to subtract 3 from this value to figure out step 0. So since this has a value of 6, if we subtract 3, this one's going to be, has to be 3. So basically our starting point, let's use this in blue. So our starting point equals 3, and our rate of change is equal to 3. Now I know it's the same number, but if you've got different colored markers, you may want to do this in different colors to identify which value is the starting point and which value is the rate of change. The rate of change value is the one that's multiplied times n. Okay, in class we saw some students, they made a table, and that helped them figure this out. Find f of 10, so basically we're using this equation. F of n equals 3 plus 3n, so we're plugging in 10 in place of n. So then we get 3 plus 3 times 10, and we end up with 33. Question 4 says, find the value of f of n when it's equal to 72. So basically I'm taking my function equation and I'm making f of n equal to 72. So I'm replacing, in this function here, I'm replacing f of n with 72 to figure out what n would be. Okay, then I'm subtracting 3 on both sides of the equation, and I get 72 minus 3, I get 69. And then the next step here is I divide both sides by 3, and then I get 23. Okay. Task 2. Here's my function, f of n equals 3n plus 5. Find f of 5. So basically, step 1 is we are replacing n with 5. And if we replace n with 5, we're going to get 3 times 5 plus 5, so we get 15 plus 5, which gives us 20. Okay, find n when f of n is 38. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking this equation and I'm replacing f of n with 38. So I'm rewriting this equation and replacing f of n with 38. So now we can solve our equation. We subtract 5 on both sides. 38 minus 5 gives me 33. 33 equals 3n. Then we divide both sides by 3 and we get n equals 11. You might want to hit pause and think about this and replay in order to see the explanation again if you're having trouble understanding. All right, next. our task 3 was to solve for these equations. So if I have 3x minus 5 equals 33, what first step that we need to do is we need to add 5 on both sides of the equation. Since I've got minus 5 here, we need to add 5 on both sides of the equation. So then I have 3x equals 33 plus 5, which is 38. And then to solve for x, the next step is to divide by 3. Okay, our answer was a fraction. Question 2. We had to subtract 5 on both sides of the equation first. We end up with negative 2x equals, and 21 minus 5 is 16. And then the last step is we divide both sides by negative 2. We get negative 8. The next one, there's more than one way to solve this one here. What I did here was in this example, I divided both sides by 2. And if you divide both sides by 2, you end up with x plus 5 equals 7, because 14 divided by 2 is 7, and then we can subtract 5 on both sides and get this. Now, what some other people in class did, which is completely correct, what some other people did was they did distributive property with the 2, and then that gave us 2x plus 10 equals 14. And this is also correct. If we do distributive property, 2 times x gives me 2x, 2 times 5 gives me 10. So we have 2x plus 10 equals 14. And then the next step here would be to subtract 10 on both sides of the equal sign. And then if we do that, we end up with 2x equals 14 minus 10, which is 4. And then the final step is divide both sides by 2, and then we get x equals 2. And that is also a fine way to solve the problem. You might want to hit pause and copy this down if you need extra support. Okay, task 4. Let's see how people solve this. So we're trying to solve for x. We need to bring the x's on one side and the numbers to the other. So I thought I'd bring the x's to the right. So we subtract 2x on both sides to make this 2x minus 2x to make that go away. And now we're left with 5 equals, so if I'm subtracting 2x on both sides here, then that makes this 3x minus 2x is going to give me x. So now I've got 5 equals x, which is the 3x minus 2x gives me x, and then minus 9. And then the next thing I chose to do was I said, okay, let's get this minus 9 over to the other side of the equal sign. And so I added 9 on both sides of the equal sign. And if I add 9 on both sides, then I'm left with the x over here, so x equals 14. Okay, let's look at the next one. I wanted to bring the x's over here. So I added 3x on both sides since this is minus 3x, and then I end up with 5x, because 2x plus 3x is going to give me 5x plus 5 equals negative 10. Right? Okay, so now I want to keep 5x all by itself, so I can subtract 5 on both sides of the equal sign. And the reason I did that was so that I can make this positive 5 and negative 5. I can make that cancel out, and then I can combine this negative 10 and negative 5 to negative 15. And so now I'm left with 5x equals negative 15, because this positive 5 and negative 5 cancels out. And then the final step is we divide both sides by 5, and we get negative 3. Okay, on this one here, we did distributive property with the 2. We get 2x plus, and then 2 times 5 gives me 10. and then equals negative 3x minus 10. So now we want to get the x's on one side. So what did I do? I added 3x on both sides of the equation. And by doing that, that's going to make this cancel out, because negative 3x and positive 3x, it's going to go away. And then I combine the 2x plus 3x, and that's going to give me 5x. So then I've got 5x plus 10 equals negative 10. Okay, and I want to get this 10 over here. So what do? I subtract 10 on both sides of the equal sign. And then that's going to make this go away, because 10x minus 10, it's 0. 10 minus 10 is going to be 0. And then negative 10 and negative 10 gives me negative 20. So I have 5x equals negative 20. Divide both sides by 5, we get negative 4. Okay, next steps. Distributive property with the 2. Distributive property with the negative 3. Then to get the x on one side, we added 3x on both sides. 2x plus 3x gives me 5x. We have 5x plus 10 equals 30. Now we subtract 10 on both sides. We have 30 minus 10, that's going to give me 20. 5x equals 20. Divide both sides by 5, we get x equals 4. Here I did distributive property with the negative 2. So negative 2 times x gives me negative 2x. Negative 2 times 5 is going to give me negative 10. Okay, so I've done distributive property here, and this is what I've got. Now I'm going to combine the 5x minus 2x, and that gives me 3x. I have 3x minus 10 equals negative 3x plus 10. And the next step that I did was I wanted to get rid of this negative 3x on the right side of the equation. So I added 3x on both sides of the equation to get rid of this. And now I've got 3x plus 3x, which is going to give me 6x. So I've got 6x minus 10 equals negative 10. And now the next step is we added 10 on both sides of the equal sign. And that was to make this go away. And then I have 6x equals, and then I've got negative 10 plus 10 is 0, and then we get x is 0. Okay, final step. This one was a little tricky. A lot of groups didn't get quite this far, but here we've got a common denominator. Let's just focus on one of them. Okay, so here we have a common denominator of 3, 3, 3, and 3. So in order to get rid of that denominator, we needed to multiply both sides of the equation by 3. So I have 3 times the first fraction gives me 5x. 3 times negative 2/3 gives me this. 3 times 1/3 x gives me x. 3 times negative 2/3 gives me negative 2. All right. Next step is I do distributive property with that negative 2. And that gives me negative 2x. And negative 2 times 5 gives me negative 10. And then the next step was to combine 5x minus 2x, which gives me 3x. Okay, and then the next thing I want to bring this x to the other side. So I subtract x on both sides of the equal sign, because that makes this go away. And now I've got 3x minus x is going to give me 2x. So I've got 2x minus 10 equals negative 2. And I want to get this to the other side of the equation. So I've got minus 10, so I'm going to add 10 on both sides of the equal sign. And by doing that, that makes this cancel out, and I end up with 2x equals 8. Divide both sides by 2, I get x equals 4. Okay, last question. Now I noticed here that I had a denominator of 3 and I have a denominator of 2. And so I needed to multiply both sides of the equation by 6 so that we could get rid of our denominators. So if I'm multiplying both sides of the equation by 6, I have 6 times this term, and I've got 6 times the other term, and 6 times this term, and then 6 times that term. Okay, now that's nice because now what I do is I could say 6 times 2 is 12, and 12 divided by 3 gives me 4. I've got 6 times a half is going to give me 6 over 2. 6 divided by 2 is going to give me 3. I've got 3 times a third, so 3 divided by 3 is going to give me a 2. And 6 times a half is going to give me 3. You may want to hit pause and think about that for a second. Okay, so now I'm going to do distributive property with this negative 3. And by doing that, I end up with negative 3 times x, which is negative 3x. And negative 3 times 5 is minus 15. Okay, and now what I did was I combined the 4x and the negative 3x to give me x. So now I've got x minus 15 equals 2x minus 3. And then my next step I did here was I subtracted 2x on both sides of the equation. And by doing that, that cancels out this 2x here. And now I've got x minus 2x gives me negative x. So x minus 2x gives me negative x. I've got negative x minus 15 equals negative 3, right? Minus 15 equals negative 3. And another step I'm going to do here now to get rid of this minus 15 is I have to add 15 on both sides of the equation. And when I add 15 on both sides of the equation, that's going to make this go away. And I have negative x equals, and then negative 3 and positive 15 is going to give me 12. And then I divide both sides by negative 1, I get x equals negative 12. You should put as much of this as you need to in your notes, and this can be useful during your open notes test.